Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regular council meeting for the Ides of March. So just be aware. We had anticipated that Councillor Wilson might be able to join us remotely, but we will commence in any event and hope that he is able to join as technology allows. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any alterations, additions, or deletions to be made to the agenda? Councillor Demota.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I have two. I'd like to add addition 6.6. Council development opportunity. And I'd like to change agenda item 12 to in camera regarding a legal matter. And then add 13 adjournment.
Thank you for that. Are there any other additions or deletions? If there are not, I will take it that we have a motion from Councillor Demota to amend today's agenda with the addition of item 6.6, council development opportunities, to adjust agenda item 12 as an in-camera session dealing with a legal matter, and to change the item number for adjournment to item 11, or pardon me, item 13. All in favor of that proposed amendment? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I have then a motion, please, to approve the agenda as amended? I looked slow. Both hands were up. Councillor Waxer, your motion. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of February 15th have been circulated. Are there any errors, omissions, corrections required to be made to those minutes? The record can show that Councillor Wilson has now joined us. If there are no adjustments to be made, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 15th, 2022, as presented. Councillor Melnett, thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Is there any business arising from previous minutes? Okay, seeing nothing, we can move to agenda item 5. Bylaws. 5.1 is simply bylaw summary for information. The substantive matter before us is agenda item 5.2. Traffic safety bylaw for proposed first and second reading. Mr. Gibbon, I can turn to you, but you can delegate as you see fit.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship. Committee saw the recommended traffic safety bylaw amendments. Administration is bringing that forward from committee on the committee's recommendation. The amendments as proposed would simply enact the required changes to reduce speed limits within the municipal townside boundaries to 30 kilometers an hour, unless otherwise posted. There would be a number of points at the entry into the town site that would remain at 50 kilometers an hour. And the bylaw in front of you, traffic bylaw 2.4, includes the required amendments to enact this change. Your Worship, I'm happy to answer any questions. Ms. Madon is here as well, the Director of Protective Legislative Services. Between the two of us, we can handle any questions that you might have. But this is here with the recommendation that council give first and second reading to the changes to the traffic safety bylaw as presented. And then following that, if council gives first and second reading, then we would forward it on to Parks Canada before bringing it back for third and final reading.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Questions from councillors of administration? I have one, if I see you now, Councillor Demoted, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I will of course return. Mr. Given, in the briefing note under discussion items, the second paragraph, there's a reference that changing the speed limit is the best option, and I can accept best option from a public and pedestrian safety perspective. Fiscally, although it's not major, I understand that it's a more economical option in terms of the amount of signage required. Can you explain how it is better from an operational perspective and how it is perceived to be better from a visitor experience perspective?
Sure, Your Worship, I'll take a bit of a stab at that, and then if Ms. Yvonne wishes to supplement, she absolutely can. I think from an operational perspective, the reduced requirement for signage would lead to less operational complication for our department that installs and maintains signs. And so having a consistent uniform standard that first off, it doesn't require us to buy as many signs, hence the fiscal part that you referenced, also means that we don't have to install and maintain as many signs. And so that would be the operational benefit. And with respect to the visitor experience, I think providing visitors with an easy to understand framework for rules in a jurisdiction makes for a better experience. People can easily understand and know that when they enter the town site proper, that the speed limit is 30 kilometers an hour, rather than having a visitor who may not be familiar with Jasper confused and regularly looking to see, is this street 50 kilometers an hour? Is it 30? They can simply know that as they enter the town site, it would be 30 uniform.
Thank you for that. I wonder whether there is any component in the operational perspective that relates to enforcement.
Your Worship, I'll refer that to Ms. Nadal. I'm not certain if there's a operational benefit with respect to enforcement. And she may be better positioned to answer that. There's nothing that comes to mind.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Your Worship, enforcement is not within municipal jurisdiction at the moment, so we were not contemplating that would be addressed through the operational wording that's in the request for decision, as Mr. Given outlined, just the maintenance on signs. So Mr. Gray tells me we can spend easily up to $10,000 annually maintaining and replacing signs. So which requires labor, of course. So it wasn't so much about enforcement, but more so from the operations department perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Councillor Demoda.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm concerned about the implementation and the rollout, and not necessarily in a negative sense. So that the conversations at the table, discussing the social norms, adaptation to this, and it's about educating the public and providing some buy-in, opportunities to buy into the change, so that there's acceptance and that we would have more compliance than the need for enforcement. So I think that those are naturally necessary steps that we need to take, especially if we're having such a blanket decision being made here. I think it's a good one, and it's a good step forward, I think, for the community. I have a question for administration, and it revolves more around the lines of our contribution to the RCMP now. Before, we were contributing any provincial tickets that were issued within the community had to go to the province. Now, I might be under the understanding that there might be a change in those rules, and if there are, maybe if we can get some milk, we're not sure. So anyway, I think that some information regarding that would be helpful for us, because if there is an opportunity for enforcement, whether it's locally or for visitors, you know, my concept isn't to make money off of this, but at the same time, if there was enforcement regulations and we had to impose tickets, if that would stay in the community, because that would help offset some other concerns. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks, Your Worship. Ms. Nadan can again confirm this, but my understanding is that municipalities that are enforcing provincial laws who pay for their own police under a municipal police service contract with the RCMP receive the funds from ticketing. I am not certain whether municipalities like Jasper, who previously hadn't paid for policing, were covered under the provincial police service arrangement. I know that they didn't receive those funds. I'm not certain if that's changed today, but in any case, as Ms. Dawn referenced, the municipality would be enforcing provincial statutes, and so there would be money to be had there. Those transactions, if any, would be under our municipal bylaw, and any penalties would rise as a result of the municipal bylaw. Ms. Dawn, I don't know if you have anything additional to add about whether the municipality's ability to collect revenue for enforcing provincial laws has changed recently.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Through the Councillor Demota, I don't believe that has changed. There's a change in the system in how we forward provincial offenses to the province to get payment. So currently that could be if a license plate is expired or items like that, or officers are currently enforcing that, and we would forward to the province to get some revenue. Separately from the conversation around policing, if we changed what our bylaw enforcement officers are enforcing, as in if we wanted them to do moving traffic violations, we could do that, but that would represent a change in service standard and different steps we would need to take to get there. And then I would assume that they would be enforcing a municipal bylaw, which would be a moving traffic violation, therefore kick in with the provincial regulations, and then maybe that revenue could come to us, to be confirmed, but we would have to change what our officers are currently doing and the service standards in order to get there.
Go ahead, Councillor Blount.
Yeah, if I just may follow up for a little bit for more clarification on that. So we can't work with our partners in the RCMP to enforce moving traffic violations within the municipal boundaries going forward from what I'm understanding. Instead of using the bylaw officers.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Demota, the current setup would remain, as in the RCMP would be enforcing speed limits in town as they have and as they will continue doing, except our ability to get revenue from that is not there, is my understanding.
Well, if I may, just to finish up, I'm guess what I'm looking for in the next step is when we're rolling this out is to work with the RCMP and doing some education and community, and not necessarily going to immediate enforcement, but like we did with parking tickets in the summertime, maybe handing out warnings and things like that as a step forward. Maybe not the next step forward, but I think, you know, just to help the community adapt to the change, because 20 kilometers in a lot of areas is a huge jump. So I think that we're going in the right direction. It's all about the messaging and the steps. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may add, Councillor Demota, in terms of timeline for the bylaw, so we're asking for first and second reading today, which then means we would go to Parks Canada for certification on the bylaw. And then the next regular meeting of council is not until April 19th at this stage. So I did speak with Mr. Greathead in terms of getting signage, so the timelines around that matter a lot. And the date at the bottom of the bylaw, come third reading, we could always modify as well to say that it comes into force and effect on a specific date. So tentatively, third reading would be April 19th, but if we needed more time, we could do that as part of third reading.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Councillor Wilson.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'd just like to speak to the speed limit reduction briefly and put my support behind it. Of course, there's many benefits to the speed reduction that have already been discussed, such as reduced operation costs and, in my mind, a more enjoyable environment for visitors and residents alike along some of our commercial, more commercial streets, such as Connaught and Patricia. I think we've seen it in the last couple of years during the pandemic with the increase in patios. Speed limits have been reduced, and in my mind, I feel that it's quite a bit more enjoyable having traffic reduced along those streets, and I think that the tourists and residents, yeah, for the most part, feel the same. I also think that by reducing speed limits, we're not solving everything. It sets the bar, but again, we do have to slow people down. So, making the speed limits 30 across the board doesn't slow people down. So I'm just hoping that administration will use this tool in collaboration with other tools in their toolbox to reduce speed. So, speed reduction methods like narrowing or constricting streets in key areas, I think are still avenues we have to explore. This isn't a solve all, 30 across the board, everybody's gonna drive 30. Of course, that's not gonna happen. I'd like to see, I'd like to open up the discussion now on, not today, but in the near future on bike lanes, again, talking to constricting traffic in some areas to reduce the speed before a car would enter into Patricia Street commercial area. Just some of those small things such as planters or even patio barricades, that does tend to slow traffic down. And I think we just have to explore that with administration in the future. Just trying out some of those methods to reduce speed further. But again, our first step, I think, is reducing the speeds across the board. I think there's only benefits to this way forward, and I'm willing to make a motion once everybody's discussed the topic in front of us. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Along the lines of Councillor Wilson's thoughts and Councillor Demota, I also support this. And while I do support it, I think we've been speaking about speed limits, we've been talking about parking, we've been talking about resident exemptions, patio seating. It's all part of a bigger picture. And it starts here. I'm all for making our streets safer for cyclists and pedestrians. And if our final reading of this is after our strategic planning, that also makes me happy. Because I came into it this morning a little bit reserved, just because I feel like we've been talking about all these pieces that I hope will fall into the right places when we actually get our plans formalized. But I like that we seem to all be on the same page. So I do support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Just before I return to you, Councillor Wilson, to make the motion that in some senses is already being debated, I just wanted to return quickly to administration to, I hope, close off some outstanding questions about enforcement and the RCMP. So as has been indicated, there is no intent at this time to change the powers of our municipal bylaw officers. So currently they do not enforce and are not empowered to enforce moving violations. That is within the purview of the RCMP. And I just want to confirm for the record that through this process of the long debate on reduction of speed limits and the preparation of the bylaw that is before us, there has been ongoing interaction with the RCMP, and they understand and support the reduction in the speed limit on the understanding that they are the body to whom enforcement will fall, all other things being equal. I think it's important for the public to understand that whatever the future might be in terms of enforcement, This is predicated on support now from the RCMP with full knowledge that they are the enforcing body. Mr. Gibbon, through you perhaps to Mr. Don, can we just get that confirmed on the record?
Thank you for the question, Your Worship. Mr. Sergeant Bedesi is supportive of the change. We've had that conversation. It is not documented in writing would be the next step. But he is certainly supportive of the change and understands that that remains within the purview of the RCMP to enforce. Having that said, I don't think we can expect that priorities for the policing service will be adjusted by any means to reflecting a change in the community. Certainly, to Councillor Demota's point, as we launch and as we implement the change, there might be a bit more focus on it. But understanding the current duties of the RCMP and the number of members they have and the amount of things they have to address, enforcing speed limits is not necessarily one of the highest priorities, but it is still part of their purview.
Thank you for that. Right, if there are no other questions of administration, Councillor Wilson, I will return to you. You indicated a willingness to make the motion for first reading, so please do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I'll keep it short. I would like to make a motion that council approve the changes to the traffic safety bylaw as presented, and as attached, approve the reduction of speed limits within the municipal boundaries to 30 kilometers an hour, as presented in option 1 attached, and so that again is attached within the agenda.
I appreciate the motion, Councillor Wilson. I can't call this a friendly amendment, but we are dealing with a bylaw, and all that you said is preparatory to a motion that Council read for the first time, bylaw number 244, traffic safety bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, for the purpose of regulating and controlling traffic in the town of Jasper. And that's what I heard, I think, from you. Is that correct?
If you don't mind, just give me one moment. I believe that's what you heard. Yes. So let me just. Sorry, could you repeat that, Mayor Island?
That Council read for the first time bylaw number 244, traffic safety bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta for the purpose of regulating and controlling traffic in the town of Jasper.
That sounds appropriate to me. Thank you for rewording that for me. Appreciate that.
Most welcome. Is there any debate on the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And might I have a councillor, perhaps Councillor Wilson again, would you be interested in making a motion that council read for the second time bylaw number 244, traffic safety bylaw 2022, being a bylaw of the specialized municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta for the purpose of regulating and controlling traffic in the town of Jasper?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'd like to make that motion as well, please.
Thank you, councillors. That motion is on the table. Councillor Demota?
Well, no, I was going to offer to make the motion. That's good.
Right. Any debate on the motion for second reading? I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you, staff, Ms. Madone in particular, for getting that through first and second reading and to us for that purpose. This matter will now go, as you indicated, to Parks Canada for certification, and all things being equal, would be back for third reading April 19th, you indicated. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 6, request for decision, 6.1, fiscal controls and reporting policy, which was before us, I think, just a week ago at Committee of the Whole. Mr. Given, can we need to introduce this subject?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation from the committee is that council approve the internal fiscal controls and reporting policy, B109, as presented. I'll just pause there to say that you'll see that we are proposing a new numbering system. This was previously the old or existing bylaw, the existing policy is B009. Administration is proposing that with the adoption of this policy, we start a new 100 series of policies so we can identify where they have been more recently updated at easy reference. So there's a small change there from what was forwarded from committee, but just an administrative matter in terms of the numbering system. Policy B009, the existing fiscal and financial controls policy, was originally adopted by council back in 2010. Draft revisions of this policy were reviewed by Committee of the Whole on September 28th of 2021, and again as Your Worship referenced, just last week on March 8th. Broadly, the policy outlines the amount of delegated authority and approval authority that council is willing to provide to administration on both the operating and capital sides of the budget, and further defines the reporting expectations that council sets for administration. I won't go through all of the details of the policy, given that council members just recently discussed that last week, but we'll maybe just highlight a couple of changes that were not explicitly identified in the committee and really sort of arose as a result of the discussion. There was a discussion about the meaning of programs and how we could make it clear, the difference between programs and departments. And so you'll see in 4.1 that there was a small change that highlights sort of that nested nature of departments and programs. And we have, I think that there's probably a level in between that we need to discuss at some point, but this policy isn't doing that today. But suffice it to say that we have municipal departments, such as the one headed up by Ms. Sedon, Protective and Legislative Services. And within that department, there are a number of different programs that are delivered at the frontline level. Those programs may be delivered by different subunits that we haven't really described yet, and perhaps they're branches, but Ms. Sedon has the Enforcement Services branch, the Fire Services branch, and Legislative branch. So we could describe that, but what we're talking about when we talk about programs, we're talking about those frontline units of service that the fire department, for example, delivers a program of emergency fire response within the town site limits. The fire department also delivers an inspections service. And so you can see that how one middle unit of administration can deliver many programs. All that to say that a program is that very small frontline level of service. This policy clarifies that no director or manager has the authority to exceed the total approved expenditure budget for their department or program that they administer. And then 4.3 and below identify an escalating ability to reallocate within a program, so that managers have the ability to reallocate within a program that they deliver. The directors may, with the approval of the Director of Finance and Administration, reallocate between programs within their department. And the CAO may authorize reallocations between departments. So again, there's an escalation there. A manager who delivers multiple programs can reallocate within their program. The director can approve a reallocation between programs for a manager, and the CAO has the authority to reallocate from one department to the next. All of those cases are predicated on the fact that the municipal budget as approved by council should never be exceeded. The next section, section 5, deals with capital budget authority, and I will zoom in on 5.6. We had some discussion about the 10% of the capital budget or a fixed number. And so you'll see in the green highlight, administration has added a little bit more specificity to say that the CAO is authorized to provide the necessary funds from reserve or other appropriate funding sources, provided the original scope of the project was not exceeded. So administration can't do something different than was originally approved by council. And that the required funds do not exceed the lesser of either 10% of the approved project budget or $350,000. So again, just adding that a bit more clarity, there is still an upper limit on that, but recognizing that we may have capital projects that are $10,000 in nature, or we may have ones that are $1 million in nature. And obviously 10% of a project in that case would be vastly different. Your worship, those were all the changes that arose from committee other than the definition of fraud has been approved to provide clearer language about a broader definition of what fraud looks like. So this is the policy, has been reviewed by committee twice now. The recommendations and amendments from committee both times have been adopted. Is here for council consideration for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Demoda, you're not holding your pen up. I just saw that potentially as a point of view.
I think it might be some remnants of Councillor Cherneau sitting here. He has a pen clicker, and that used to drive me nuts. I just found myself doing the same.
It's in the chair. Councillor Waxer.
Yes, in reviewing the policy this morning, I looked at 4.5 and I wondered whether the second sentence in that policy might in fact be a separate bullet on in and of itself, because there's circumstances where I believe it probably wouldn't relate to the first. For instance, in grant funding or contract funding, whereby the amount left at the end of the year would not necessarily go into municipal surplus.
Mr. Given.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I can respond to that. I can appreciate what Councillor Waxer is saying. I think there's maybe two different intents together in 4.5. I could easily see the last sentence standing on its own as a 4.6. I think the intent is a 4.5 to say that if the municipality receives additional revenue, the administration doesn't have the latitude to go and spend that revenue on doing more things without council approval. I think that's one idea, the first idea that's contained in 4.5. I think the second idea, that at year end, any excess revenue of the municipality becomes part of the municipal surplus. I think that that's a separate idea. And just to Councillor Waxer's observation about grants, if a grant was received for a specific purpose and was intended to be used over a number of years, that wouldn't be excess revenue in the given year, because some of that revenue would be committed in future years. So I don't think it would apply in that case. I think there are two different principles. The first the first sentence of 4.5, if we get more money in revenue than we expected, we need to come to council for approval if we wish to use that. Second idea, which could be in 4.6, was that at year end, any excess revenue of the municipality should go into the municipal surplus, which then of course would mean the council would have to approve the use of the surpluses in any future years. So based on Councillor Waxer's point, the administration might recommend that we create a new 4.6 that would have the last sentence, and it would say at year end, any excess revenues shall become part of the municipal surplus.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Waxer, satisfied with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions? I then have just a couple. Mr. Given, when you concluded your presentation just a few moments ago, you ended on 5.6. And I just want to confirm that the wording in the draft document is what is proposed, that is the yellow and the green highlighted, because there is a bit of a discrepancy between that and the request for decision notes that nevertheless indicate there have been adjustments made as subsequent to March 8th. So if you go back to the first page of the, what I'm going to call the briefing note, when it deals with 5.6, it says it should read such and such. It doesn't read that. It reads something different. I much prefer the way it reads where it's highlighted in the actual policy. And I just want to confirm that that is exactly the intent.
Yes, Your Worship. So what we're seeing there is a bit of a version control issue between reports that are presented to committee and the item that's presented to council on committee's recommendation. So we don't change the rest of the report. We're not making a new report every week as a result of what of committee's changes. We do change the recommendations. So you'll see that in the request for decision, the committee now is called committee recommendation rather than administrative recommendation. But we don't change the body of the report just in terms of administrative workload. So you're correct that the bullet point midway down on the second page that references 5.6 is a leftover from the first time it came to committee. The policy, the draft policy in front of the council is the one that.
Thank you for that. My question then, and I apologize that I did not mention this a week ago at committee. I overlooked it entirely, but if you take a look at proposed section 4.4 of the policy, my question is there significance in the shift in wording from reallocations in the previous provisions to expenditures in this provision? And similarly, there is a change from budget to expenditures. So there's a different focus because we've changed the wording from reallocations and budgets to expenditures. And depending on the answer to that, I have questions about preceding two clauses. So everything is predicated on reallocations to program budgets. But this section focuses only on expenditures, not budgets, and that is different. And so is there an intentional significance in that change of wording?
Your Worship, thank you. So while we don't have it in definitions, and perhaps we could, but I would suggest that there are three different things. A budget is the overall financial document as approved by council, which contains a whole bunch of assumptions and predictions and forecasts. That is the budget. And so council approves a certain budget, which is the total package. Within that, a portion of the budget is expenditures. Another portion of the budget is revenues. And reallocations means choosing to reallocate where you're making expenditures. So a reallocation is an action. A budget is a document. And an expenditure is an item within that larger document. So there are three different things. Unless I am missing it, I don't believe that they're used interchangeably. Specifically, 4.4 is speaking about how much authority administration is willing to grant to administration to exceed budgeted expenditures. So there is a budget approved by council. That budget includes expenditures, and 4.4 suggests that any expenditures that would result in a total expenditure, gross expenditure, exceeding the funding available in a program. So council has approved a program at a certain amount, and if we are going to go spend more than 10% above what council approved, we need to come to you for approval. So it's not an interchanging of the words. All of the three words, I believe, have distinct meaning in the policy. 4.4 specifically is saying to what extent is council willing to allow administration some wiggle room to manage within the budget that is set by council? And so that 10% could be less, it could be 1%, 5%. It could be a fixed number. It could be a combination of a fixed number and a dollar value, similar to what we do on the capital side. But it is very similar. 4.4 is very similar in nature to 5.6. That basically says, what happens when you need to spend a little bit more than you predicted when you set the budget the council approved?
If I may I just want to continue my train of thought. The reason I asked the question is that a week ago, I raised a question with respect to both 4.3.2 and 4.3.3 about whether the 10% is applied to the receiving program or the contributing program. So you're going to reallocate funds up to 10%, and I asked the question of 10% of what. So assume that it might be a bad example, but let's say that studded tires was a program within studded tires for bicycles was a program within community development, as was daycare, and there was a need for a reallocation. Surely if you wanted to reallocate to the studded tire program, you couldn't reallocate 10% of the daycare. It would have to be 10% of the studded tire program. And I wondered, reading this in preparation for today, whether 4.4 might answer that problem, but I'm not sure that it does. Similarly, 4.3.3, if you're going between departments, I would suggest that council might be uncomfortable if you took 10% of the amount of our largest department budget, which again, I'm going to assume will be community development. It used to be a close contact between operations and culture and rec, but now with culture and rec and FCS combined, I'm sure that'll be the largest budget. Well, could you take 10% of that and reallocate it to our least funded department? I would think that is not what council really has in mind. And yet I don't see anything in the proposed policy that guards against that. And so I was hoping that maybe the change in wording in 4.4 was an attempt to reflect that, but I didn't hear that. So I leave that out as just an open question that, in my view, has not been sufficiently resolved for my satisfaction. Go ahead, Mr. Ford.
Sure, Your Worship. Yes, certainly 4.4 doesn't address the matter that you're raising. And you may have, when you brought this up last week, you may have referenced this idea that if we wanted to be more specific about 10% of what, simple change in wording would be possible in both 4.3.2 and 4.3.3, where we're more specific about which program budget and which department budget. And so you could say, and you may have suggested this before, Your Worship, for example, in 4.3, or sort of happens closer to the start of that paragraph, the CAO may authorize reallocation between departments of up to 10% of the receiving departmental budget as approved by council. So again, that would make it clear that the 10% of what. And so the department, in essence, saying the department that needs additional funds can only get up to 10% above what it was originally approved for. And then anything after that, of course, would be where 4.4 would come in. That same thought of adding words, the receiving, could be applied in 4.3.2, just in front of up to 10% of the total receiving program budget as approved by council.
Thank you for that. That would certainly be my recommendation to council, to just adjust the wording in that small way to make it clear. It's 10% of the smaller budgeted amount, the receiving department amount. Anything else from Councillor Demoga?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that that was the shortened version, what I was gonna, to try to add, to add some clarity, because I was gonna say the total budget for that specific program, but the receiving program sounds a lot better.
Any other questions for administration? If there is nothing else, I would invite a motion, which I think would be that council approve the internal fiscal controls and reporting policy B109 with amendments as discussed at today's meeting. So the council prepared to make that motion? Councillor Hall, thank you. Any debate on that motion? Councillor Melman?
So we spent time discussing 4.3.2, but to Councillor Waxer's point about 4.5, are we separating that to be 4.5 and 4.6?
That was my understanding, yes. I didn't specify that in the motion, but that was an amendment that I thought we had accepted.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to make sure for clarity.
Thank you. Any further debate? All right, and Mr. Given, before I call the question, if that motion passes, you have sufficient direction to finalize the policy?
Yes, Your Worship, what we do, we would make changes to 4.3.2, 4.3.3, and we would add 4.6. So just again, so the administration, make sure we heard you correctly, we would adjust the wording in those items under 4.3.2 and 4.3.3 to add the receiving. We would break apart 4.5 to create the new 4.6, which would read, at year end, excess municipal revenue shall become part of municipal surplus.
Thank you for that. If there is no further debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So again, thank you to administration for shepherding us through that process, and thank you in particular for that change from B009 to B109. It's very clever so that we can more easily track what has been updated and what has not. I missed that entirely. I commend you on that subtle little change. All right, that takes us to agenda item 6.2, I believe. Legislative committee terms of reference. Again,
Your Worship, another item
Given, go ahead.
that was in front of the committee last week. The recommendation was the MURD has been changed to a committee recommendation that council approved the legislative committee terms of reference as presented. We'll just note that there were some amendments from when this was presented at committee. First, the time of the meetings was changed to 10:30 a.m. That's on the first Tuesday of the month. And I believe we made a change to 4.6 that meeting minutes will be forwarded to the next regularly scheduled council meeting for adoption. There was some discussion about that. Council may wish some different language there. Maybe it would be for information, but I know that was a discussion with the committee. But the terms of reference as contained in the package outline the recommended legislative committee structure and responsibilities, really focusing the efforts of the legislative committee on a comprehensive review of Bylaw C190, the municipal procedure bylaw. Worship, happy to answer any questions from council.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councilors, questions? Councilor Watson.
Did we discuss adding an alternate to the list? Subcommittee.
We did, although I don't know that we determined the result. So we discussed mayor, alternate mayor, who would sit for whom, and we discussed the potential for alternate. But I can't say that I would resolve any of those issues. Mr. Gibbon?
Your worship, from my recollection, the conversation was left off that should the mayor not be able to attend, the deputy mayor would be qualified to attend in the mayor's absence. And I think that that's where we got to, was that there would be that one alternate, somebody attend the place of the mayor. It does not address the situation where the council members who are not the mayor will be appointed if they were not able to attend. So council may wish to identify that the membership would be 3 members of the council and an alternate. That is 4 members of council, but really, I think up to you, your worship, and council, how you wish to structure it. Administration was really attempting to ensure that this was in line with the already proposed membership that was passed at the organizational meeting. If council felt that there was a need to have an alternate, I think civil change to 2.1 could be made to.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, seeing as that this is a committee that may meet once a month, if that, in the future, I'm not sure. If there's an inability to produce quorum, we still have 3 more weeks to make it before the Christmas. So that to me, it's more cumbersome. And if it becomes an issue.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on frequency of meetings and the schedule, and not to change. And we debated this a week ago, and this is the recommendation that on the first Tuesday of each month at 10:30. But it's going to be set now in these terms of reference, and so I don't know how the meeting schedule changes after this, except to come back to council. What I was going to suggest is that this will become the accepted terms of reference today, presumably, and it would have application on the first Tuesday of next month, but it's not going to happen. So it seems to me that we might save ourselves some difficulty now by amending item 4.1 to say the committee will meet at 10:30 on the first Tuesday of each month, except when the regularly scheduled council meeting of that day has been canceled. So that every time we cancel a council meeting on a Tuesday, it would be a given that this committee would also be subject to the same rationale for the cancellation of the regular meeting. Otherwise, I think it just sets up a bit of an administrative headache. And just for the fact that I'd like to be Tikayun, 4.3 should say, except as provided for in section 17 of the procedural bylaw. But apart from that, I am really happy to move forward with terms of reference for this legislative committee. I'm looking forward to the work that it will be able to do to assist council moving forward on a number of fronts. So thank you for all the work. Anything else with respect to this before I would call for a motion to approve the legislative committee terms of reference subject to amendments as discussed in 4.1 and 4.3. Councillor Demota.
Just reminded me that I lost my new word list. And I think that was the first time in my life I've heard Pikayu, but I like it. So thank you.
Do I have a motion? Councillor Roxer? Thank you. And that motion is that council approve the legislative committee terms of reference as amended with respect to item 4.1 and 4.3. Any further debate? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. That takes us to agenda item 6.3, 2021 transfers from, and two, I think, operating to restricted reserves. Mr. Gibbon.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I believe Ms. Malinchuk may also be available to council should you need it, but I know we had some lengthy discussion about this at committee last week. The recommendation from the committee is that council approve a year-end transfer to and from reserves in the amount of $128,851.62. Just for clarity, this is the sum of the transactions. Two of the transactions are essentially building the reserves by adding $93,000 that results from less than expected expenditure on salaries, and adding $18,264.43 that results from higher than expected reimbursement from WCB for our positive health and safety record, and then a reduction in reserves of $17,587.19 to support expenditures with respect to emergency management and protective services related to COVID supplies and services. So the total of those transactions, the total amount of those transactions is $128,851.62. But there are two of those transactions that are building the reserve, and one of them that is taking it. Your Worship, I know that we had a discussion about this last week. If I or Ms. Malinchuk can clarify anything else further for council, we're happy to answer your questions. Administration is bringing this forward as we're getting towards the end of the closing the fiscal year, and we're seeking council approval for these transactions so they can be reported in the 2021 fiscal.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Councillors, are there any questions of Mr. Gibbon or Ms. Malinchuk? If there are none, so the councillor prepared to make the motion as recommended. Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to make a motion that council approve the year-end transactions to and from the reserves in the amount of $128,851.62 as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Melnick. Is there any debate on that motion? Nothing. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. Agenda item 6.4, S block delayed invoice. Again, Mr. Gibbon.
Yes, Your Worship. Keeping in line with the need to close out transactions part of the year end, administration has identified that there was a delayed invoice from ATCO Utilities with respect to improvements in the S block parking lot project. There was an amount of approximately $58,748.84 the municipality was not invoiced for when that project was completed in 2019. We do still have funds available from the grant source that was intended for the project, the MSIC fund. With this allocation, the payment of this invoice from ATCO, the project overall will still be under the initial budget by just over $130,000. So administration is recommending the council approve the allocation of those MSIC funds in the amount of $58,748.84 for tax to the S Block capital project. The intent is to pay that bill from APCO, the municipality just received in late August of 2021.
Thank you for that. Mr. Given, any questions of administration from councillors? Councillor Moore?
No, I'm ready to make the motion.
All right, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Wilson, was your hand up?
But just out of interest, lights have been on for a while now in the parking area. It's a question, I guess. I think because we realized that we hadn't paid the bill because the lights hadn't been turned on. The lights have been on for the last while.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Mr. Given is nodding. You may not be able to see that. But yes, apparently the lights have been on, and credit ultimately, I think, to Councillor Keller-Rempe for having brought this matter to the attention of council, but the lights weren't on after we had completed that project. And this is the result of the sleuthing to find out why that was the case. But they're on now. Thank you. So Councillor Demota, your motion that council add payment of invoice 3010817 in the amount of $58,748.84 before tax to S Block capital project and fund project with the remaining municipal sustainability infrastructure capital. No, that's not, what is that initiative?
If I may.
You may.
I know that you like to assist us in our motions, but I'm trying really hard to get better at them. Been here for a long time, so thank you. And I would have worded it that council approved the additional payment of invoice 3010817 in the amount of $58,748.84 before tax. To S Block capital project and fund the project with the remaining MSIC funds available.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Any debate on that motion? I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Which takes us to agenda item 6.5, property tax receivable write-off request. Again, a matter dealt with a week ago in committee, back for decision. Mr. Given, anything to add?
Your worship, this is just the final one of our items that are year-end transactions as we enter into the audit. The administration has identified and has discussed at length in the last weekend. The provincial government has chosen not to pay, essentially, they're short paying their property tax bill on the provincial building. The amount of that is reflected in the committee recommendation, $25,745.25. For the purposes of our financial bookkeeping and audit, administration has to deem this as an uncollectible amount, and therefore we're recommending the council write it off. There may be other political implications or considerations, but from a financial management and accounting perspective, we're obliged to recommend to you that this is not an amount that we can expect to collect, and so we need to have council approval to write it off.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Anything from councillors? Is there a councillor prepared to make a motion with respect to the matter? Councillor Hall.
computer just died, so maybe you can do the honors and I will.
I believe the motion from Councillor Hall is that council direct administration to write off property tax receivable for roll number 500,000 provincial building for half of the amount levied in the amount of $25,745.25. Is there debate on the motion? Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I seem to recall when we were discussing this in committee that there was also a letter that would be written by administration to be sent to the provincial government regarding our displeasure, I guess is the way I could put it. And as long as that's noted for that to be done, I don't know if it needs to be part of the motion.
It was part of our discussion and our recommendation, I thought, last week. And if Councillor Hall is prepared to accept that as a friendly amendment, I would certainly encourage that it be added as part of the motion.
I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, the second part is that administration right to the government to express displeasure. I might suggest that perhaps the mayor be directed to do that. I'm not sure that it's the role of administration to take on that task. So if you would both be happy with that change in wording. Right, it is a two-part motion then before us. Any debate? Prior to calling the question, I feel compelled to speak on the motion, and I will vote in favor of the motion somewhat reluctantly. So I think it is critical to look at the background and discussion material that has been provided to us in the request from our own administrative sources, and particularly the penultimate paragraph of the first page of the request for decision, which in fact is taken directly from a federal government statement with respect to payment of what in the federal world is called TILT, payments in lieu of taxes, but it is a commensurate issue that the province identifies in the DPOT or whatever pronunciation you might give to grants in place of taxes. It recognizes the same thing, and as expressed by the federal government, most federal and provincial properties benefit from the services provided by Canadian municipalities. The Government of Canada firmly supports the principle that as a property owner, even though it is exempt from taxation, it should share in the cost of local government equitably with other property owners in the community. In other words, they recognize and they honor at the federal level the obligation to pay for the services that they receive, even though legally the municipality cannot tax a higher level of government. So as I did previously, when the same matter was before us for a different amount, and for the same reasons, that is to say that as I wish to show respect for our municipal staff and permit them to get on with the business of balancing our own books, I will vote in favor of the motion. But again, as I did previously, and again, for the same reasons, I take this opportunity to express, as Councillor Melnick has politely said, our displeasure, but it is my profound objection to the practice and the attitude of what should be our provincial partner. And quite apart from the economics of the matter, and quite apart from the province clawing back dollars from municipalities in order to balance their own books on municipal backs, the more disturbing aspect of this unilateral, unjustifiable action is the message that I think it intentionally sends to our public, to our residents. It is a message which purposefully undermines respect for and confidence in municipal government, municipal management, and the value of municipal services. It absolutely erodes trust at the community level. And this from a government which has launched and carries on a campaign for a failed deal for Alberta within Canada. It seems to me if they seek fairness, perhaps they could start by exhibiting fairness. Alberta's municipalities certainly deserve fairness from the province. Our provincial government has determined that it will simply decline to pay its fair share of the costs of the municipal services it receives. Instead, they shirk their moral and ethical obligation and leave their burden to be carried by others among our local taxpayers. It is unfair and extreme. As I've said in the past as well, in financial terms, particularly in our case, it is but a whisper, but as a sign of disrespect, I find it to be absolutely deafening and quite appalling. And I will be happy to write a letter expressing our displeasure with the process. But the end result, we are in a position where we must move forward. The provincial government is acting on what could be called technicality, but it is legally entitled to do what it is doing, as morally reprehensible as I find it to be. So I will vote in favor of the motion and be happy to write the letter. Councillor Reports.
I agree with every single thing that you said. And to support that, I will also be in favor of moving this, but under protest. And, I've in the past have supported initiatives to keep in good standing with the province and, to keep our house clean, so to speak. And this is a step in that, because I believe we have bigger fish to fry or hills to climb still and maybe to die on. So, with respect to approving this, I think it's in a matter of, keeping our books in good favor with the province and having this as part of our broader discussion when we talk about the other tools and the issues that we have internally. And I think this could be a good discussion piece for positive movement for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from councillors? Okay. I think it's worth voting if I didn't make it clear. I really do respect that the federal government, through payments in lieu of taxes, shows honor and integrity by respecting a moral obligation to pay its fair share. And I encourage the province to take a look at the way municipalities in our own province and across the country are treated by the federal government in this instance. I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 6.6, I believe, which was a request to be added by Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you very much. There's an opportunity for myself as well as other councillors to attend an elected officials education program known as EOEP, called Municipal Corporate Planning and Finance. It's a Zoom course. It's held on Wednesday night starting March 23rd for 2 hours each evening, and there's 4 sessions. the opportunity came about when I went and looked to see what was coming up that's available for council training, and I was inspired by Councillor Hall's enthusiasm to take her last course. And instead of asking for approval for myself, I noticed that there's still availability to register. So I felt that if there are other councillors that wanted to take the opportunity, because this is our last regular meeting we can make a decision on, that I would open it up to all of council. And that's what my motion is going to be. If that's okay with the rest of you. So in accordance with policy B003, council member development opportunities, it says the council will support activities designated to assist council members in their efforts to improve their skills as members of a policy-making body. But then the next paragraph says that council shall retain the authority to approve or reject participation in specific activities. So here we are, and I would like to move that council approve any council member's attendance for the EOEP. I've lost my Municipal Corporate Planning Finance Zoom course starting on March 23rd, 2022.
Thank you, Councillor DeVota. Any questions of Councillor DeVota with respect to his motion or debate about the motion? How long is the course? Is it a day course?
It's 2 hours on Wednesday night, and it's 4 sessions. So starting March 23rd and then the following consecutive Wednesdays for 2 hours. And this could be part of building towards your municipal certification.
Thank you. If there are no questions and no debate, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Bit delayed, can understand why. There were none opposed, but that motion is carried. Takes us to agenda item 7, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. There is nothing on our agenda. I presume that there's nothing that has arisen. Agenda item 8, other new business. Is there any other new business we brought to the attention of council? If not, we can move to agenda item 9, the motion action list, which was updated a week ago, so it's there for just information. Councillor reports. Agenda item 10. Are there any reports to be given by councillors? Councillor Hall.
I returned from Edmonton last night from the councillor's role in strategic planning EOEP course, and I will compile my thoughts because I want to get everything together while it's still fresh and I'll email out to all council by the time. Some highlights. It was really great.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor DeMota.
I found that course to be very rewarding. I took it last year. And Councillor Hall and I also attended a session at AUMA revolving around this. And I think there'd be very healthy things to bring to our planning session. I'm just curious, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hall, if you received a digital copy of that manual.
I did not, but I'm happy to share mine. Once I get on my notes, I'll pass it around.
I have the digital one because during COVID, we did the courses via Zoom, and if it's up to date, if it's the same one, I'd like to share that with the rest of the council. We'll just have to compare them.
Thank you. Any other reports, Councillor Baxter?
I will be attending the RCMP community conversation this evening.
I can report that last week, I think it was Wednesday, The municipality and Parks Canada held a joint exercise with respect to emergency preparation. Tabletop exercise I attended for the first day of that. There was a combined total of 66 people in the room, each of them with an individualized role in a response to an emergency. It was an opportunity with a consultant who comes very highly regarded and some other expertise in the room to work through a scenario to ensure that we are better positioned as a community and as partners to deal with an emergency that might befall the community. And I really encourage, I'm proud to say that at the end of that session, I think that there were lots of learnings and gaps identified and filled and acknowledgements of roles and responsibilities. And as a community, we are so much better prepared for an emergency. It's not necessarily the sort of thing that the public sees, but it is reassuring to know that with our partners, we're working strategically to be prepared in the event of an emergency. And great credit, I think, to our director of whatever that department is, legislative services, emergency management and legislative services, whatever it is. Christine Nadon, excellent job bringing that together. It was a great session, and I was really happy to be a part of it, even though I was only able to be there for 1 or 2 days, but an important opportunity for the community. Any other reports? If not, upcoming events. Councillor Waxer has indicated she will be attending the community conversation with the RCMP this evening. That's great. Tomorrow there is a NETMA, and former Councillor Dwayne Wacko is being recognized. So if you're able to come out to the Jasper Museum tomorrow at 5 o'clock, that would be great. Jasper Park Chamber of Commerce general meeting tomorrow morning online, and our strategic planning session early next month, and an intergovernmental meeting coming up Tuesday, May 17th, and we will have to arrange to meet sometime in advance just to confirm agenda items. Go ahead, Councillor Demore.
Yeah, if I may, I'd just like to add that I believe May 1st to 7th, first week in May, is Emergency Preparedness Week. I think that's an important thing to emphasize, specifically from the item that you just addressed. So I'd like to make awareness. We can add that to our kind of agenda.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Adding events, we should recognize that the community will be celebrating the Pride Festival, April 1st to April 10th, I believe. And I wish I know what year this was, but I believe we're probably approaching 14 years, 13 years of the festival in the municipality. And it's great that it's the only Pride Festival in Canada that occurs during the ski season.
Appropriate for our community. There is a flag raising on April 1st, I believe at noon, in front of the emergency services building. All right, I will add one item or two perhaps. I have been invited to attend an industry roundtable with the Minister of Tourism federally, that is Randy Rossman, that is going to be held locally on Saturday of this week. We are, Mr. Given may be able to report later, we are working on an opportunity for council to also meet with the minister outside of the industry roundtable. We'll let you know if that works out. And I think I've advised council previously, but just to confirm, I've got a Zoom meeting with the mayors of Banff and Canmore scheduled for March 24th in furtherance of our common objectives with respect to provincial recognition tools. Any other upcoming meetings or events which should be brought to the attention of council? One matter that comes to mind is that assessment reviews or assessment appeals are coming soon, I think. Just so for any residents who might be watching either live or on tape, I know that if you have issues with your assessment, there is an opportunity to meet with the assessor coming soon, and if staff could confirm that, since I've now opened the door without the necessary information, but it's important because it's coming within the month and people ought to get prepared. Mr. Dunn?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just reviewing information to that effect, and I can confirm that assessment notices have been mailed out, and that the deadline to file an assessment complaint form, is the appropriate terminology, is Friday, April 8th. I do not have any indication of a meeting with the assessor, but certainly residents should reach out to the administration office and have a discussion. Is sort of the first step after receiving your assessment. If you have any questions, and importantly, the deadline being April 8th.
Thank you for that. All right, if there are no other events of note, Councillor Milner?
With my apologies, Your Worship, there is a Jasper Community Housing Corporation meeting on Thursday of this week as well,
Thank you.
which I will be attending. Councillor Wilson is on that committee as well, and
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I have just been in contact, or I'm in contact with Mr. Given. We were discussing possible delay of this meeting, but I will fill everybody in as soon as possible. Councilor Melnick, sorry for the, sorry for that, but we'll have a chat through email here in the next day.
All right, thank you all for those additions. We can move to agenda item 12, which is now a request to move in camera. So if I might have a motion to move in camera at, I think it will be 3 o'clock by the time we get there, but before we move in camera, before I accept that motion, just information for those who are watching the live stream. It is unlikely in the extreme that when we emerge from the in-camera session, there will be any further business other than the adjournment of this meeting. So I thank all of those individuals who have been watching, and we will carry on. We will return to open session to adjourn this meeting, but there will be no more decision-making discussion at all on today's agenda. So I will invite a motion to move in camera, and again, thank all those who tuned in today and bid them a good rest of the Ides of March. Stay safe. Councillor Demota.
Thank you. I move that we move in camera at 3 o'clock.
Thank you. All those in favor? There are none opposed. We will move in camera and just take a short recess as individuals depart the quorum room, and we get set for our in-camera session.